Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Science of Kabbalah with your hosts, Rabbi Yitzhak Michelson and William Hall, here on Israel News Talk Radio.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Science of Kabbalah here on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. This is Rabbi Yitzhak.
This is William Hall. How are you today, brother?
I am doing fairly well. Still will ask people to continue to pray for me, this issue with my throat. I had some tests last week. We're just waiting on some results, so you'll have to forgive me if sometimes you hear me slurping my tea. It's just to kind of keep my throat well lubricated. So my Hebrew name is Yitzhak Moshe Ben Hinda, for those that want to pray in that way. And I'm having my tea at night because I usually love coffee. I know you do too as well, William. But
yes, and I've just recently switched over to decaf. Apparently, I'm too wired already.
You know what I call decaf?
What's that?
Dirty water.
Dirty water. That's all it is. Why drink it if you can't enjoy the
I don't
bite?
understand having decaf. I have my 2 big mugs of coffee in the morning, and I have to be honest. I'm usually a coffee snob, but I've been drinking instant for the last few months because I'm just too lazy to get out my espresso maker and make really my favorite coffee, which I've mentioned before. And this is going to be a good segue into the show today. I drink something called Café Hafuch. Café Hafuch basically means upside down coffee. I guess you would kind of compare it to a latte, and probably be pretty close to what you call a latte in the U.S., where it's some espresso and then some steamed milk. And so I say Café Hafuch because I think you and I talked about this. We really got onto the subject of the concept of what we call achdut in Hebrew, this idea of unity. And it just seems to me like the world is so hafuch, it's so upside down right now, with people arguing and people fighting, and there being divisions and people blocking each other on Facebook, and people who even in real life are friends are suddenly not talking to each other. And so we started talking about this in Parshat Vayechi when we were talking about Yaakov Avinu, the patriarch Yaakov giving all these different blessings to his different children. And then we said that even though they came from these sort of contradictory midot, these contradictory character traits, that at the end of the day it required all of them to come together in order to be what we call Klal Yisrael. So we have a special guest with us today, so stay with us here in the Science of Kabbalah on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com.
Israel is located in one of the most volatile areas in the world. Israel is an island of stability in a sea of war and unrest. In the midst of this turmoil, Israel stands out as a beacon of order and human progress. Each week we update you on what's happening in this, the Jewish state, a true light unto the nations. This is Jay Shapiro. Join me every Thursday on Israel News Talk Radio.
Welcome back to Science of Kabbalah with Rabbi Yitzhak Michelson and William Hall, here on Israel News Talk Radio.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Science of Kabbalah. Before the break, William, you and I were talking about my favorite kind of coffee, Café Hafuch, and I made a segue into the idea that we've been talking about this concept of unity, and yet if I had to title it, I would probably call it something like Finding Unity in an Upside-Down World. And I mentioned that we have a special guest today. I can't believe that it's been so long since I've had him on, but I understand he hasn't been on since I probably did either Light to the Nations or Beyond the Matrix with my good friend Rob Bryant. So our special guest today is Rabbi Avraham Sutton. I think he has a special perspective on this. I think he feels sort of the same way I do. I feel a sort of sense of anguish spiritually in the idea that I see so much division and lack of unity. So first of all, I want to welcome Rabbi Sutton to the show. Welcome, my good friend.
Yes, sir.
Shalom. Shalom to you, Yitzhak, and to you, William. Nice to meet you.
Thank
William.
you. Oh, that,
So you sort of have heard, in the intro how I set this up, and you and I have talked about this offline. You understand where I'm coming from this idea of talking about the tribes and Yaakov giving the blessings to his son, and we came out of Tu B'Shvat last week. There are all these different things. I mentioned the Ketoret and that the Ketoret, all these different elements have to come together. We have all of these kind of contradictory elements. So that's really where I want to get your take, is to sort of hear what you have to say about all of these concepts, the idea of this negativity, this upside down world, this idea of unity, and yet seeing all of these contradictory concepts coming together. How do we bring it together? Not that you have an answer on how to bring unity to Klal Yisrael, but give us your perspective, and certainly from a Kabbalistic perspective, what you're seeing, how you feel about this.
Wow, that's very juicy.
I know, it's a lot.
And very challenging, yes. Here we are. You and I, Yitzhak, are in Israel, William's in America.
sir.
The world itself is going through what we basically pregnancy, birth pangs. There's the narrow straits that we're going through. The Judaism, Kabbalah, we give we have this long history of stuff that goes back to the Bible, and then before that to before Moshe, before Moses, we can go back to the patriarchs and back to the Garden of Eden. The Kabbalah would take it even back further, because we see that in the actual text of the Torah, it takes us back into the process that preceded creation, the plan in God's mind to make a creation, that there's a plan, that there's an overriding plan that's going to be a 6,000-year plan towards a great Shabbat, a great Sabbath. We're starting now with at a very crucial moment in history when these things are happening now that doesn't come out of nowhere. Our prophets told us about it. Prophets told us that before the final redemption, there's going to be social upheaval. We might not have known how exactly it was going to unfold. The prophets were shown certain things, but mostly they were taken out of their body and taken up above and shown things that they were only able to communicate a small percentage of it back to us down here. And so we have those prophecies, and we know that they're very powerful about what's going to happen before the Messianic era, the pre-Messianic era that we're in now, which is a birth canal. And so it's not surprising that things are going on now, that there's divisiveness, that there's uncertainty, that there's fear, that there's something worldwide here that's going on we've never seen this to such an extent. And people are thinking, and people are wondering, is this Gog and Magog? Is this the famous war at the end? Some power is going to try and take over the world, like in Ezekiel 37 and 38. And the Hashem, God, is going to step in at one point. And he's going to bring the Messianic era it's going to come in. It's going to change everything. What do we have to go through between now and then? How dark does it have to get? So one of the things that our teachers teach us is that we need to connect up to the higher plan itself to get a little bit of an orientation here of what's going on from that high bird's eye point of view, in order to be able to live our lives down here and make it through these birth pangs, these birth contractions, and to pray and to cry and to hope, because we were told it was going to be hard. But I can tell you, and I feel very deeply, that we were born for this. We came into the world. Our souls have been here before, but this time we all came back together from all the various different lifetimes. This is like what's called Act 3, Scene 3. This is where all the characters come back onto the stage for the finale. That's why we've all been born at this time, is to know that Hashem, God, is doing something above and beyond what human beings are doing. Any evil that human beings are perpetrating, any lies, any frauds that they're perpetrating. The Lord of the universe is using them to bring about his plan, unbeknownst to them. And so for us, those of us down here who want to serve God, who want to be connected to the divine plan that's bringing the Messiah, so we need to be together and overcome the power of disintegration, of entropy that tries to work its way into us and to make us suspicious of each other or whatever. We need to have an idea that's strong enough, the messianic idea that's strong, that's coming in. It's not, you don't have to wait till Messiah for the Messiah light to shine. It's shining. It's here. So we need a little access to that. That's called the Torah of the Mashiach, the Torah of the Messiah, that unifies us, that gives us the strength, the power to stand together and to know that Hashem's doing what he's doing and that it's going to be good. And that, in a sense, is not just a passive resistance. It has a very positive effect on the way things unfold. Just in this last week's Torah reading, Moshe is telling the people who are all complaining what it's going to be and when maybe the Egyptians are going to take us back to Egypt, and oh no, this is the end. He says, just calm down. Hashem says, I will fight the fight for you. You just be quiet. It says in Hebrew, Va'atem tacharishun. Tacharishun is charesh, to be silent, almost to the fact a person who's dumb, who doesn't speak, is called a cheresh. So the verb form tacharishun is be quiet. It means be so quiet that you know that I'm here and that there's nothing but me here, God is saying. You can't start screaming. There's two different types of prayer. You cry out, and like in a foxhole, God save me, I promise I'll do anything you want. I'll just take anything, and please just save me. So that's crying out. The implication of crying out, which is legitimate, is that you're not here and I gotta call you to be here with me. But be quiet means be quiet enough to know that the whole universe is God's stage. It's I don't know if I can really do justice to it, but it's beautiful. Be quiet. Know deep down inside that I'm with you. And I'm not far away. I'm in you. I'm around you. I'm all over. It's called a paradigm shift in consciousness. So attaining quiet with each one. And it doesn't mean, as I said, it doesn't mean we don't cry out. There is what to cry about. When people are dying, whether it's through malpractice or the wrong use of ventilators or the censorship of actual real medication that can help and that's been taken off the market, like bad stuff. But whatever the case is, on a human level, we can cry. Just think about it. How we love life. How we love life. And we're asking God, please don't do this to us. So that's a little bit of what I want to say.
How does the Messianic era, if we're in it now, how does it flow with the idea of tikkun olam? I mean, because I know in Christianity they say their Jesus is supposed to come back and fix everything. But according to Judaism, it's the opposite. It's like, we're supposed to fix things and then Mashiach comes. So how does that work together?
No, it's never one or the other. It's never just God's grace against our actions. We rely on God's grace. Judaism only reacted against Christianity in saying, in the sense that it's not just God's grace. Action is important. Our endeavors to embody godliness are extremely important. Act with Hashem. We act with God. We become his agents on this planet, in this world. We are conduits of his blessing. We, in a sense, get rid of the ego that says, I'm doing it, and say, we know that you're doing it, God, but we know that you want to do it through us. Who are we? How can we? And God says, I want you to do it. And I want you to know that I am doing it through you, but I need it that I want you to be able to active in this, active participation in the process. So that's for sure where some people get stuck. It's not a dichotomy. It's a working together with God.
So just so I can
understand.
understand.
Moses, that's what we have with Abraham and Sarah. That's what we have with Joseph. That's what you have with David. All of them work together with God. They eliminated the 99% of the ego, and they kept only enough in order to do what they needed to do, but to know that God was doing it through them.
All right, guys, we're going to have to go to a break here. So there's going to be more with Rabbi Avraham Sutton when we come back. Stay with us here on the Science of Kabbalah.
The Tamar Yona Show.
Tamar? She's sassy.
She's smart.
She's funny.
But she's also a real Jewish mother.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tamar Yona. And yes, I can be all of those things, but at Israel News Talk Radio, I'm here to bring you the news stories and guests that you may not hear anywhere else. Join me live on air Sundays, Mondays, and Tuesdays for the most unique and bold talk radio in Israel.
The Tamar Yona Show.
Shalom, I'm Leah Aharoni. Join me on my show, News from the Torah. Each Sunday, we'll use the weekly Torah portion as a prism for understanding the news today. Listen to News from the Torah to gain clarity about the times we're living in and to understand your own spiritual path in the process. News from the Torah every Sunday on Israel News Talk Radio.
Welcome back to Science of Kabbalah with Rabbi Yitzchak Michelson and William Hall here on Israel News Talk Radio.
Welcome back on Israel News Talk Radio. Joining us again is Rabbi Avraham Sutton, and discussing some really, for me, is very interesting stuff for sure. So to kind of pick back up or to more refine my earlier question regarding, the idea of tikkun olam, and so how is it supposed to unfold? Like, we're living this world, and we go into the Messianic era, and so tikkun olam is the idea of us repairing the world ourselves, and then Mashiach comes. Are you saying before that, us repairing the world, before that is where we're in right now, the birth pains of... I'm just trying to wrap my head around everything. And another reason why I ask it this way is because due to me being the host of Tanakh Talk, which has probably about 80% ex-Christian who are now counter-missionaries, thank God, not all of them know this either. And so this will be, and these people are also are listening to the show. So it will be very educational for me and all of us on this end who've exited Christianity and have just buried the New Testament like forever, to have a good understanding of this since we're in this conversation.
Well, okay, I hope we can help a little bit. But again, so what we've been talking about is the God-man partnership, right? So there's not just grace and not just actions. It's we do what we can here, and we ask Hashem to help us. It's so simple that perhaps maybe oversimplified, but that's what it comes down to. Now what I want to say is that our souls come from above. We came down into this world, and it's called incarnated. We came into a body. And when we're born, that's all we know. We just know the physical. But as we grow up, it's time for us to now know that we are souls who have come into bodies, rather bodies with some vague thing called a soul. And being a soul, it's likened to a rider on a horse. When the riders are all asleep under the tree and the horses are all running around together, that's all they see, just horses, physical beings. But when the riders wake up and say, "Hey, I want to move with my horse. I want to go up that mountain there. I appreciate my horse. My horse, I can't do anything without my horse. My horse is my beloved vehicle through which I do in this world what needs to be done. And I want to join with other riders on their horses. We're no longer just horses. We're riders. We have a purpose. We have a connection." And so one of the most beautiful ideas that I've learned in Kabbalah is when God calls the name of a righteous person. He says, Avraham, Avraham, as Avraham is about to take the knife to his son's throat. God calls him and says, Avraham, Avraham, calls his name twice. Later on, when Yaakov, is about to go down to Egypt to see Joseph for the first time in 22 years, he has a dream in which God calls him and says, Yaakov, Yaakov, calls his name twice. And then at the burning bush, when Moses is not sure, he's left Egypt, he's escaped Egypt, he's living with Jethro. He's now the shepherd of Jethro's sheep. He's out in the forest, he's out in the desert at the bottom of Mount Horeb, which becomes later the Mount Sinai. And he sees the burning bush, and he's drawn to it. And he hears Hashem call to him, Moshe, Moshe. That's the third one in the whole Bible, the third and last. In the Chumash, in the 5 books of Moses. And then there's one more in the book of Samuel. And that's a beautiful story also. But I want to concentrate on Moses for the moment. What does it mean that God calls your name twice? And the fact that he only did it with 3 individuals, and actually 4 individuals, doesn't mean that he's not doing it with you and me. The first name is what's called the soul root, the root of the soul in the heavenly spheres. That's where we all come from. But when we're down here, only a thin filament of a branch comes all the way down and enters into and becomes the indwelling soul in each one of us. When God calls your name twice, he opens you up and reconnects the little you that you know, that you grew up in, the little boy, the little girl that you grew up as, the little soul aspect that you have within yourself. He reconnects it to the power source from which it came. He electrified Moses at the burning bush, meaning to say he impacted Moses, the little Moses, who grew up in Egypt and who was looking for God. And this was his first prophetic experience. And he opened him up and reconnected his little soul to the source. The Torah doesn't just tell stories. It wants all of us to be able to do this. In fact, I can even say it's a little bit parenthetical, but Moses not only saw a burning bush in front of him, he became a burning bush. If you look at the actual way that the verses are written there was a light inside, a fire inside the burning bush, and it was also surrounded by fire. And of course, fire is light. So there's a light inside of you, and there's a light surrounding you. And when those two connect, you become irradiated by the light. So the idea here is that at the higher levels, at the soul root level, all of us are connected. Call it the collective drama of the souls, that all of us were up there in heaven, and we were told, we're going down. And at first you're going to lose contact with heaven, and you're not going to know why you're there. But then we're going to tell you, we're going to give you jolts of awareness. You're going to know that you're not just a little baby born on the planet Earth. You're a soul who's come down to the planet Earth to do a mission, to fulfill a mission, a godly divine mission. And then when all of us start to wake up, that's then the real revelation of the Messianic age. Right now, it's just before that. It really is just before that. Just before that, what's going to happen is there's going to be a force on the planet Earth that's going to try and divide us and separate us and kill the connection to the supernal divine soul root. And that's why Gog is called Gog. Gog is a roof that clamps down and shuts earth off from heaven. And that's why the temple, the third temple, is called Sukkah David, the Sukkah of David. And a sukkah is a thatched roof. You must be able to see the stars through the thatched slats or tree branches of the sukkah. It has to have holes in it. It has to be an opening between heaven and earth. There's a force that wants to close that off. It's scaring us to the extent that it has so much power over our lives. It's a stealth force that wants to overcome us and control us. But when we become aware of it, we become directly connected to Ezekiel, and to Isaiah, and to Jeremiah, and to Daniel, and all the way back to David, to Elisha, and Elijah, and all the way back to Joseph, and Moses, and Abraham, and Sarah, and Adam, and Eve, then we become empowered to be something completely other than who we think we are. And I just want to clarify that one last point, is that we take on the higher mission consciously that makes us more than just the little boy or the little girl that we grew up as. We accept what's called the Ol Malchut Shamayim, the yoke of the kingdom of heaven upon us, and say, God, I'm ready to do my mission at the higher level. Whatever I have to go through, whatever you have in store for us, we know that we're doing it now only in order to serve you. So my point here is that there's a force on the planet now that's trying to overcome us, to smother us, to shroud us, basically even to kill us, or certainly to kill our spirit, to divide us and to conquer it. And so we have a chance through the teachings that were given down for millennia, the true teachings of the Bible, that we were told in the end of days, this is what it would be like, but we would have the power of godliness on our side.
Beautiful. I have so many things that I want to talk about, so many notes that I made, and it really has to do with the idea of, again, coming back to this idea of hafuch and kind of touching on the concept of the tree. I see so many people, and I mentioned this to you off air. I'm just going to set this up because we only have a few minutes before we have to go to break, is this idea that when we're talking about it from a Kabbalistic perspective, when we're talking about it from a spiritual perspective, it almost seems to me as if people are more concerned with having themselves rooted from the bottom down rather than being rooted from the top up. We discussed in Tu B'Shvat the concept of the Maharal, this idea of the inverted tree. And of course, the Ari HaKadosh has some amazing things he says about that. And of course, I know you're going to be able to clarify that and elaborate on that. And I really want to do that because you talked about us being conduits of his blessing. And this idea of the conduit really speaks to me of that idea of the different elements of the tree. We have leaves and we have branches and twigs and a trunk and roots and so forth. So we're going to have to go to a break here in just about a minute. So that's where I want to go. This idea of really the fact that there were so many differing opinions when I grew up, and yet we were able to look past those things and we were able to find commonality. I talked about this idea of people would say, oh, that guy's walking around with his head in the clouds. And I feel like that's exactly what we need to do. In a spiritual sense, we need to be people that are walking around with our head in the clouds rather than somehow trying to be rooted down below. So that's where we're going to come back with Rabbi Avraham Sutton. I'm so happy that you're here with us today, my friend. Stay with us, everybody. We're going to have to go to a short break. We'll be right back here on the Science of Kabbalah on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com.
In a time where feelings have become fact, where rational thought and common sense has disappeared, one man stands above it all.
I'm Howie Sobiker, your political hitman.
Political Hitman airs every Tuesday at 11:59 p.m. North American time, 7 a.m. Israeli time, only on Israel News Talk Radio.
Are you interested in transforming your life, drawing closer to the Creator, and uncovering the deeper meanings and hidden treasures in the Hebrew Bible?
Then join me, Rav Yitzhak Michelson,
and me, William Hall,
on the Science of Kabbalah, where we are seeking to narrow the gap between what we understand of our physical and spiritual worlds. So make sure to tune in every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Israel time, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, here on Israel News Talk Radio.
Welcome back to Science of Kabbalah with Rabbi Yitzhak Michelson and William Hall here on Israel News Talk Radio.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Science of Kabbalah. We're here with my dear friend, Rabbi Avraham Sutton, who's been sharing some amazing concepts with us. Before the break, I was talking about the Maharal and this idea of the inverted tree. I really would like you to clarify it.
Great. So I'm going to quote from the Maharal. Maharal was an amazing thinker. So what he says about this is very, very beautiful. Let me just read it to you in translation. And let's see where we can go from there. He says, in truth, each man, each human being, and all of mankind together, all of humanity, can be likened to a tree. And it's written in Deuteronomy 20, verse 19, for man is a tree of the field. The context there is a little bit different. It's about, then you make a siege around a city, and you're not allowed to destroy fruit trees. And it has this very interesting statement there, which it takes it out of context, because a human being, is a tree of the field. So he says the difference is that man is an inverted tree. For whereas the roots of a physical tree are in the ground, man's root is above. For the soul, the divine soul, is man's root, as we mentioned before. And it's in heaven, and that when man's head is facing upwards and his feet are on the ground, he's closer in his head to his root. His hands are thus like his main branches, and his feet are the smaller limbs that branch off from these. His torso is the trunk of the tree. Why is this important to understand, he asks? He says the root of the physical tree is below. It receives its sustenance from the ground below. Man's soul, on the other hand, draws its life force from heaven. Simple, but profound. Just you draw your life force from heaven. You thought you were just a physical being? No. So the Malbim, he was born in 1809 and passed away in 1879, just before the beginning of the 1900s. So in the story of creation, at one point when he's describing what's going on during the 6 days of creation, he says each successive stage of creation was on a qualitatively higher level and less attached physically to the earth. He said first you start inanimate matter is part of the earth, and the plant stands above that, the plant domain. And it manifests a hierarchy of grades, a shrubbery that grows without cultivation, then grasses that need seeding in order to reproduce, and then trees which must be planted. However, they're still attached to the earth by their roots. The animal, on the other hand, has severed the physical junction to the earth and is seen to be correspondingly more advanced biologically. In other words, the ascent in biological complexity in the animal kingdom is matched by increased freedom of mobility. He says noteworthy is whereas the root or head of a plant is buried in the ground, like when you take out a carrot out of the ground, you're taking it, that green stuff that, the branches that come up over the ground surface, they're the branches that come from the roots. So the carrot itself is the head. So the root or the head of a plant is buried in the ground. The head of the animal is horizontal. You got the horizontal now of an animal walking on all fours. So, and he's equally poised between heaven and earth. So, and the more complex the animal, the higher it holds its head. Finally, this culminates with man's upright posture. He's not talking Darwinian evolution here. He's talking about an idea of how to see that plant life is grounded in the ground, animal life is horizontal, and human existence is pointing upwards. The head pointing in the direction of the roots of the spiritual root in the upper realms. It reflects his status as a creature, both of the upper and lower realms, his posture being that of an inverted tree. The fact that we're rooted up above, okay, we talked about it before. I want to bring in a very important idea here, that the higher up you go into the root system, if you talk about the sphirot, without going into any detail, but the sphirot called the tree of life. And that tree of life is a tree that is, whoever you want to call it, inverted. The trees outside on the ground, they're inverted. And the tree of life is really with its roots up to top. That is not an inverted tree. That's the real actual way the tree should be, and the human being in the model of that. The point is that the higher up you go in the tree of life, the more unity you encounter. What becomes plurality and a multiplicity down below, like 6 billion, 7 billion people walking around the planet, it gets up to that we're part of soul groups. And those soul groups are part of even greater soul groups until it all pyramids up into the root of one big soul that we're all part of. The higher you go, the more you encounter unity. Just like on a mountain, when you go up the mountain and you stop and you see the town below. And then you go up a little bit more and you can see the entire valley with a few towns. And then you go even higher, you can see even more. Your perspective changes. You include much more in one glance than you could have at the lower levels. So taking this now and making it a practical idea, the more we connect to our soul, to our spiritual root, to the whole reason and we came here and the mission that we took on when we were in heaven, the more we connect to each other, the riders, the more we connect to each other in a much more deeper way, to the extent that the verse in Leviticus 19:18 becomes a living reality. You shall love your brother as yourself. And the numerical value of that in Hebrew is ve'ahavta l're'acha kamocha ani Adonai. You shall love your friend as yourself. I am God. Which is like God saying, if you guys love each other, I can be God. Like I can't be really revealed in the world if you steal, if you cheat, if you kill each other. You guys get together, then you can make a place for me in the world, and I can live in the world, and people will know me. What is it that you love in your friend? You love the Ani Hashem. You love the I am God aspect of your friend. You see past all the disagreements and everything, and you see past the external into the awesome infinite essence of a human being, and you love that. And then the same numerical value, which is 907 for 5 words, the same numerical value applies to another thing that we say from Deuteronomy 6:5, you shall love the Lord your God. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha is 4 words with the same numerical value, 907. 907, you shall love your friend as yourself, I am God, equals you love the Lord your God. The loving human being is the way to love God. They're not 2 different things anymore. The numbers tell us. They don't lie. The more we connect with that level, and it's a spiritual teaching. You're not going to find it in the textbooks. You're not going to find it with most people. They don't understand these things. You got to get it. You, each one of you, each one of us. That I am here to fulfill a mission, and the mission is fulfilled by me connecting to my friends, my neighbors, my family, my husband, my wife, my daughter, my son, and loving them and telling them how much they mean to me. And that we came into this world to rectify our relationships. No matter how hard they are, you can do it. And then it means people who disagree with us. That's really hard, especially in America right now. No less in Israel, I'm sorry to say. And maybe no less in Europe and no less anywhere else, where the influence of this dark power is trying to take over our lives. That Hashem told us would happen before, that would try and slam a roof down on us. We'll just end with that. The whole thrust of creation is for atoms to join to become molecules, and molecules to join to become cells. And the atom is still there, but it's come up from little league to big league. It's still there, but it's playing in a larger, more magnified level. And violins, in the violin section of a symphony, and there's the pianos and the oboes, and then there's the trombones. They're all, each one of them in their own section, and when they play together, they create a symphony that's greater than the sum of its parts, a whole that's greater than the sum of its parts. Whether it's baseball teams or football teams or symphony orchestras or molecules, once you see it, it's everywhere. That we get together and we create a whole that's greater than the sum of its parts. And that's the force that Hashem wants us to access and to utilize in order to overcome the force of darkness that's trying to take over our lives. There's so much more to say, of course. We need to learn and continue to learn and to interact with each other, to appreciate what this incredible opportunity is, this birth canal that we're in, all of us together, before the final messianic revelation. The difficulties we all have to see them, as King David said in Psalm 23, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you're with me. Therefore, I will fear no evil. That's a higher level of consciousness that King David's telling us about.
Sorry, just simply amazing, but we're running out of time. Is there anything you would like to share with people as far as contact information for you, if anybody would like to reach out to you, or how they can see more of your teaching?
I'll just say that the last 10 months I've devoted to finishing the translation and commentary on the Psalms that I started over 35 years ago. It's a work of a different quality than you've ever seen anywhere. It's a gift that Hashem is allowing me to do this. When it's done, I want to be on this program with you and tell people about it and have them be able to buy it. In the meantime, I will send the work in progress to anybody who wants it. You write to me, and it's yours. And the email is avraham.sutton, A-B-R-A-H-A-M, like Mary, A-B-R-A-H-A-M, period, dot, that is to say, and then Sutton, S-U-T-T-O-N, at iCloud.com.
Thank you so much, my dear friend. It was amazing. Stay with us every week here on the Science of Kabbalah on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com.
Where can you get the inside news on Israel? At Israel News Talk Radio, we're dedicated to sharing Israel's inside story with the world by providing our listeners with news on Israeli politics, current affairs, and Israeli Jewish culture. The Israel News Talk Radio homepage also provides you, the listener, with useful information at your fingertips, with scrolling news headlines, weather, currency exchange, Shabbat candlelighting times, and so much more. Our radio programming is always accessible and on demand. We operate absolutely free of charge for everyone, everywhere. If you love what we do, partner with us now by becoming an Israel News Talk Radio supporter. With your support, you'll be inscribed on our Israel News Talk Radio Wall of Fame. There's nothing like us in the world. Be part of something great. Israel News Talk Radio. Straight talk from Israel.
Howdy, this is Rita from League City, Texas, now living in Israel. And though my heart may have belonged to Texas, it now belongs to Israel and all the fantastic show hosts at Israel News Talk Radio.
Hi, this is Michael Solomon from Kiryat Arba, Israel. And why do I love listening to Israel News Talk Radio? Because I love listening to the interesting interviews they do and their news reporting that most other media sources don't cover.
Hey, this is Nicoleko from Malmö, Sweden. It gets pretty cold here in Sweden, so I love cuddling up with a warm cup of tea while I listen to Israel News Talk Radio.
Hey everybody, this is Frank Morris from Tennessee. Me and my dog Buster really love listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.